Greetings, everyone. Welcome to our exclusive Global Leading Voices webinar campaign. We are delighted to have you join us here today. Please be informed that if you have any questions during the presentation, you may type them into the question box in your control panel. The presenter will answer your questions at the end of the presentation accordingly. Now, without further ado, we will turn the time over to our presenter, who will begin shortly.
Thank you, Albion. Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. I am Alain Bonneau. I would like to start by thanking PCB for this opportunity to present on ISO 20000 standard. So I am Alain Bonneau, as I said, and I am the CEO of AB Consulting. We have currently offices in Europe, in North America, and the headquarters is here in Ivory Coast, from where I talk to you today. And I have been involved in ISO 20000 work group in the ISO GTC1 since 2007 or 2008. Of course, I am PCB certified lead implementer and lead auditor in ISO 20000, but also in ISO 27001, and I'm the head of delegation of Ivory Coast for ISO 27 series and also ISO 20000 series. I'm also a COVID-5 expert, as well as ITIL, MCG, Seagate from ISACA, and many other things. We will start by a short reminder of the context of enterprises in the current world. Organizations right now in the private and public sector face a set of challenges. Most of these challenges are about conformance, compliance, but also they strive to keep the first place on the market. So we can say that, first of all, they need to achieve always increasing conformance requirements while being tasked with becoming more competitive and achieving clear market differentiation. When we talk about increasing conformance and compliance requirements, we can think, for example, about the GDPR. GDPR is a generic data protection regulation, which will become effective, which all the companies working on personal data of European citizens will have to comply all over the world before May 2018. If an organization does not comply with the law, they will be fined up to, the fine will be 4% of the global income of the company for 1 year, with a minimum of 2,000 million euros fine to pay. So you can understand that the result of not being compliant is very, very painful for a company. So of course, when we talk about personal data protection, we talk about all the systems, information systems, IT systems, which will store, manipulate, and process these data. So in fact, when we talk about compliance and conformance, we always refer to the IT services, and IT services are not always delivered by only one provider, but generally the provider will require some suppliers, external suppliers, and there is a whole logistic chain where the data must be protected, conformed with, in conformance with the regulation and compliant. So it means that when we talk about conformance and compliance requirement, we refer to all the subcontractors and so on. So it means that we need absolutely to have something in place, some processes to ensure that we keep the control of all the data we are processing all over the logistic chain. Of course, organizations also need to maintain quality information in order to support business decisions. If the information on which the decision is taken is wrong, of course, the decision will be wrong as well. So it's very important for senior executives to rely on quality information to take the proper decisions for their business. The third challenge is about generating business value from IT-enabled investment, which means IT investments are more and more expensive, and the general feeling of the companies and of the business people in the companies is always that they are investing a lot of money for their IT, but at the end, the service which is delivered by IT is very poor and it's not creating enough value. So, of course, we need to generate business value from this IT-enabled investment. So it means achieve strategic goals of the enterprise and support the creation of benefits by the business through effective and innovative use of IT. Achieve operational excellence through reliable and efficient application of technology. We talked about generate business values from, I'd say, innovation linked to the technology, but also ensure that the business is able to deliver efficient and effective services to the end customers through operational excellence of the technology, of the usage of technology. Maintain IT-related risk at an acceptable level. Right now, most of the companies in the world are considering that, and when I talk about company, I talk about the boards and about the investors, are considering that the IT risk is very high, and we can, of course, make the link to security, cybersecurity, and so on. So they are very careful before taking shares in a company to ensure that the IT-related risk is correctly addressed and maintained at what is for them an acceptable level. And of course, always optimize the cost of the IT services and technology to ensure that the benefit realization will be at a high level. A little bit of history. Over the past few years, organizations have worked hard to address these challenges. First of all, most of the enterprises have embraced the ISO 9000 standards for quality management, but ISO 9000 standard is not about information and services. It's more about products delivery. So in a world which is more and more based on services, ISO 9000 standards is probably not the best standard to apply. Whatever, ISO 9001 certification has been increasingly required for EU-based operation. And now it's very often a prerequisite for submitting to an RFP. At the same time, thousands of organizations globally have turned to ITIL in order to increase the value of their IT services delivery. ITIL, because now all the business is supported by IT services, whatever the business is. I always say that even in a small shop in your street, there is a need to use some information, and they rely on maybe it's a single computer, but it's linked, it's connected to internet. So at the end, you always have to manage your IT service management, even if you are a single user in a small, very small organization. So thousands of organizations have adopted, what does that mean? ITIL best practices, because ITIL is best practices framework, which means that there is no possibility of certifying the organization against ITIL. ITIL is a set of good practices, of best practices, so people can learn about these practices, and this will give the ITIL certification that you know, which are people certification, which just prove that the people have a good knowledge of the best practices. But at the end, these best practices are adapted, sometimes in a wrong way, in the organization. So how can we say that an organization is completely aligned with the ITIL best practices? There is no way to do that. Of course, there are some audit frameworks such as TIPA which have been created, but there is no certification, official certification of an organization against ITIL best practices. So the result is that ITIL adoption has delivered a range of benefits, from reduced downtime to improved business relevance, and the creation of a culture of proactive IT management and continual improvement. This is, of course, very good, but it's not sufficient, because ITIL is best practice guidance rather than a standard. Organizations are always struggling to demonstrate this improved quality to the marketplace. I know a lot of companies, generally outsourcing companies, claiming that they are full ITIL compliant. What does that mean? That means that their people have passed an exam called generally ITIL Foundation, not more, and they know the content of the framework. Does that mean that the organization is applying the best practices and all these best practices? Of course not. I don't know any organization in the world applying all the ITIL best practices. This is not possible. Too much things to apply, 25 processes plus the functions. This is definitely not possible. So it means that people base their behavior and their practices on ITIL, but they cannot be, the enterprises cannot be certified against ITIL. So there was a need for a standard. And as a result, there is a drive to achieve the ISO 20000 certification in order to leverage this investment and expertise in ITIL and demonstrate operational competence. ISO 20000 is aligned on ITIL. The first version of ISO 20000, which was delivered in 2005, was completely based on ITIL best practices. Now, we have moved a little bit away from a full alignment with ITIL, but ISO 20000 is still based on the ITIL best practices. So there was a need to achieve a certification for the enterprises to show that they were fulfilling all the requirements of the standard. So the ISO 20000 standard has rapidly gained worldwide support. And we will see some figures later on in this presentation. Now we have more than 2,800 companies certified against ISO 20000, which is great, but which is obviously not sufficient. And we will see that most of these companies right now are based in Europe. Government agencies are starting to mandate certification for service providers, because government agencies, but not only government agencies, also very big companies, global companies, want to be sure that they can rely on their provider, IT service provider, and now, for many of them, it's a mandatory requirement to apply for a tender. So they are starting to mandate certification for service provider who want to offer their services for government IT contracts. For example, the US Air Force requires now ISO 20000 certification from sourcing providers, and the UK National Health Services requires its major service provider to be certified. It's very important for any organization to be sure that their supplier, that their external supplier are following the good practices, and the best way to be sure is to have to rely on external suppliers which are certified against an international standard such as ISO 20000. The outcomes of ISO 20000 adoption, it's very easy. Achieving ISO 20000 certification demonstrates to other organizations, suppliers, customers, staff, partners, and industry bodies that the service provider organization is knowledgeable, competent supplier. It demonstrates that they have shown they have the practices, procedures, and management system controls in place to ensure that the services are provided effectively with customer satisfaction at the core. This means that the requirements, all the requirements of the standards have been proved based on an external audit, and they have obtained the ISO 20000 certification, certifying that all the requirements which are mentioned in the standard are completely applied, and there are proofs of evidences of these practices to be applied in the company. By proving an opportunity to benchmark against the rest of market, achieve competitive differentiation, and leverage the existing investment in IT, ISO 20000 offers clear financial and operational benefit. Of course, becoming certified against ISO 20000 is not something which is cheap. Generally, it takes about 2 years to obtain the certification of the company, on the standard, depending on the scope and so on. But the result will, of course, be financial and operational benefit. It's not because the cost will decrease. Of course, it will help to optimize the cost, but it will help to achieve a competitive differentiation and prove that this organization is effectively and efficiently applying the ITIL best practices. Proved outcomes: over 2,800 IT service provider organizations throughout the world have already become certified, with a multitude of others preparing for certification. These service providers come from all sectors, not just IT outsourcers providing external services, but also internal service providers in finance, manufacturing, logistics, governments, utilities, and so on. It means that ISO 20000 is not aimed at IT service, external IT service suppliers. It's also for internal IT services, and you can become certified with no, does not exist obviously, but with no suppliers at all. It means that your internal IT services are certified, and there are evidence that the best practices defined in ISO 20000 requirements have been fulfilled. The number of ISO 20000 certificates in 2015, we don't have yet the figures for 2016, but there is an increase every year. In 2015, we can see that we had 2,778 companies which were certified against ISO 20000. For some of these companies are global multinational companies. We can see that the biggest number of companies which are certified is in Europe. Then in East Asia and Pacific. In fact, when we have a more detailed view on the countries, the leader is India. Then we have a lot of them coming from Central and South Asia, with mainly China, Middle East, North America, of course, and specifically in Canada, we have many companies which are certified against ISO 20000. A little bit less in Central and South America, and very few in Africa. And we can make the differentiation also between the English-speaking countries in Africa and the French-speaking countries, where we have, I guess it's 5 companies which are certified against ISO 20000, and they are coming quite all from North Africa. The leader in Africa is Nigeria, with 14 companies certified against ISO 20000. So more and more companies are relying on this standard. First published in 2005, as I said previously, ISO 20000 is the international standard for IT service management. It is published by the ISO, International Organization for Standard, based in Geneva, and has been adopted globally. It describes an integrated set of management processes for the effective delivery of services to the business and customer. Not only external customers, but also internal customers. The standard is based on and supersedes BS 15000, which was a standard for the UK, developed by the British Standards Organization. It aligns with best practices guidance contained within the IT framework. At the beginning, UK believed that they needed a standard to certify the organizations against ITIL. And as we said, ITIL cannot be used to certify an organization. So the British Standards Organization, which is the UK national body for standards, published first the BS 15000 standard. I guess it was in 2002 or something like that. It's a standard which retakes, it's fully aligned with ITIL V2 at this time. And they came to ISO, which is the international standard organization. British standard organization is a member of the ISO, and they came to ISO in 2003 or 2004 and said, look, we have a standard, and we believe that this standard would be very helpful to certify organizations all around the world. So the standard was discussed, amended to be applicable, to be compliant with all the countries in the world. And finally, the first release of ISO 20000 was published in 2005. So it's based on BS 50000, which itself is based on IT. It aligns with best practices guidance contained within the ITIL framework and is compatible with the other IT service management. And you can see that there are more and more frameworks appearing right now for IT service management, and also GEIT framework. GEIT is Governance of Enterprise Information and Related Technology and Approaches, including components of ISACA COVID-5 framework. ISO 20000 is completely embedded in COVID-5. So if you are using COVID-5, at the end you already have put in place the practices of ISO 20000. This is all contained within a quality management system, within a service management system, which itself aligns with other pertinent standards such ISO 9001, ISO 27001. We see more and more companies now, so we have a lot of companies which are certified against ISO 9001, and we see more and more companies, based on the fact that people are looking for more and more information security, which become certified against ISO 27001. Which is very interesting is that the management systems, the different management systems, the quality management system of ISO 9001, the information security management system of ISO 27001, and the service management system of ISO 20000 can be integrated. And there is a very interesting ISO technical documentation, which is called ISO 27013, on which I was co-editor, which is published and explains if you already are certified ISO 27001, how you can put in place, integrate your ISO 20000 management system with your ISO 27001 management system. So it's integrated implementation of both ISO 27001 and ISO 20000. So you don't need to do the work two times. You can integrate your management system. And it's the same for ISO 9001, of course. So the ISO 20000 standard follows the same structure as the same structure are all the other ISO standard. And ISO 20000 is composed now, I guess it's about 11 or 20 parts. The first part, as usual with ISO standard, is part 1, ISO 20000 part 1, is the list of requirements for a service management system that enables the service provider to fulfill the service requirements and provide value for both the customer and the service provider. It's based on this part 1 that your enterprise will be audited and the certification will be delivered if there are no non-conformity. Part 2 provides, as usual with the ISO standards, guidance on the application on service management system. It's finally the best practices for service management within the scope of the part 1 of the requirements. It provides more detail about the processes organization should follow to achieve the requirements laid out in part 1. You are not audited on part 2, but it gives you, it has exactly the same structure as part 1 and gives you the guidance on how to implement the requirements, best practices to implement the requirements of part 1. Part 3 gives guidance on the scope, definition and applicability of the standard. Of course, generally, you will not certify the full organization, the whole organization, but only a part of the organization. So how to define the scope of the management system to ensure that it's eligible to the certification. So guidance on the scope definition and the applicability of the standards. This is required to help understand the often complex supply chain involved in IT service management, particularly when many process areas and functions are outsourced. This part is very interesting as it gives a lot of examples of cases of companies which can be certified and others which cannot, depending on how they manage their suppliers. Part 4 help you to develop a process assessment model according to SPICE, ISO 15504 process assessment principles, and Part 5 provides an implementation plan for an SMS that meets the requirements of ISO 20001. So Part 5 is more about the implementation itself. And we have also various other parts supplement. For example, there is a mapping between ISO 20000 and ITIL. There is also another one which is a mapping between ISO 20000 and CMMI for services and so on. So there are a lot of publications regarding or linked to the ISO 20000 standard. So we have the pyramid, we have the ISO 20001, which are the requirements, and the certification will be granted based on this ISO 20001 requirements, and we want its certification of an SMS. A management system is composed of policies, plans, processes, procedures, and it's what will be audited by the auditor delivering the certification. So then you rely on the ISO 20000 additional guidance. We talked about part 2, part 3, part 4, and of course supporting frameworks such as ITIL, COBIT, MOF, ISO 27001, ISO 9001, and so on. So the best practice reference model for IT service management. So ISO 20001, sorry, part 1 requirement is composed, as usual, of the scope, outlines the scope definitions, the terms and definitions, service management system general requirements, so it's similar to the other service management system. And then the 4 parts, so the 4 chapters after that are specific to ISO 20000. First of all, there is a process. It's not called a process, but at the end it's a process for design and transition of new and changed services. It's a key to enabling the smooth implementation of new services or major changes to existing services. The service delivery processes capacity management, service level management, information security management, budget and accounting for IT services, service reporting and service continuity and availability management, which are aligned with the ITIL processes, the relationship processes supporting business relationship management and supplier management in the end-to-end supply chain, control processes, its configuration, change and release and deployment management, and resolution processes, which are the incident and problem management. So generally, the map of the processes is the one which is described in this schema. The benefits, we said we wanted to present 10 benefits of implementing ISO 20000. So why is ISO 20000 so important? Since only companies that have demonstrated they have implemented all of the service management processes within quality management framework can become certified. Achieving certification provides clear competitive advantage for company across many sectors, including internal IT service providers in any sector, outsourcers, and so on. What is important is that the certification requirements in part 1 requires that all the requirements have been achieved. If one only requirement is missing, there is a non-conformity and the organization will not be certified against ISO 20000. Another thing which is very important, the standard requires that every year the company has an annual review and an interim audit to verify that it is continuing to improve, and every 3 years a full assessment will be performed by the external audit company. So it means it's not only certifying a company once, but you need to continue to improve every time, every year, and every 3 years there will be a full audit which will be performed, and you can lose your certification if you have some requirements which are not achieved anymore. So it's very important to ensure when you certify, to ensure that you will continue to improve and to ensure that the requirements will continue to be fulfilled. So it's really very important on the market, because it means that it's not one achievement once, but it's always monitored and reviewed. So when you rely or when you contract an outsourcer and the outsourcer has a valid ISO 20000 certificate, it means that all the requirements are still in place and still applied in the company. So it makes really a competitive advantage for these companies, because they are continually showing their compliance. Improving, we said, ISO 20000 is also about continual improvement. So improving IT processes and critically the control, audit and documentation of these processes is a key requirement for the many sectors now subject to tight regulation, including banks, retailers and other merchants, for example, for payment card industry data security standards, insurance companies, organization needing to conform with SOX requirements in the US, and for example, utility companies which face strict new conformance rules, including critical infrastructure protection. So all these companies will benefit of the ISO 20000 certification, because it will facilitate their compliance and their conformance with the regulation. ISO 20000 certification enforces a measurable level of effectiveness and creates a culture of continual improvement. This is the key benefit of implementing ISO 20000. So we will go now through we have subdivided this key benefit in 10 topics. Probably there are more, but I have selected 10 benefits to show you some examples of top 10 benefits, but probably you can find more benefits than these 10 ones. Okay. Once ISO 20000 is in place and an organization has created its culture of proactive IT service delivery, it is far easier to outsource the reactive elements to a third party, driving down cost and enabling the IT service delivery team to concentrate on adding tangible corporate value. This means more and more we see that companies are outsourcing some part of their internal services. And it's very important when you outsource core functions of the company that you ensure that your suppliers, your outsourcers are really in line with your own processes. Because if you don't do so, you will have outsourcers which will not deliver you the value you are looking for. Generally, the wrong side of the thing is that people are outsourcing just to reduce the cost. But if you reduce the cost and, of course, generally reduce also the benefits, it makes no sense. You can outsource to reduce the cost, but you need to ensure that your company will continue to create value for its stakeholders. So it means you need to ensure that your outsourcers has a correct interface between your company and them. So ISO 20000 specified that the interfaces between the outsourcers and the service provider, meaning your IT department, have to be clearly documented and managed, and you need to keep the control of the complete logistics chain, IT logistic chain. Competitive differentiation. We already have mentioned this key benefit, which is one of the most important benefits which executives are looking for. For outsourcing providers in particular, ISO 20000 offers a chance to achieve significant competitive differentiation by showing that they are fulfilling these best practices, that they are certified against the ISO 20000 requirements, and of course they will differentiate from their competitors which are not certified. It can also drive down cost. For example, the integration of incident management with problem management can typically result in a large reduction in incidents. This has a huge impact on cost, increasing profitability in existing customer accounts and enabling more competitive tenders for new business. As you are continually improving, if you are certified ISO 20000, it will help to keep this or to increase this competitive differentiation during the time. So it's very important key benefit. Access to key markets. We already said that many organizations, government or huge organizations, healthcare, military organizations are now mandating ISO 20000 for their IT service providers. So any organization wanting to enter this market and sustain an existing market position must achieve this certification. In the UA, organizations already require ISO 9001 certification. They are not requiring right now ISO 20000 certification. There was a committee in the European Commission a few years ago which recommended that ISO 20000 would replace ISO 9000 as a mandatory certification for organization. It has not been put in place due to the pushback which was done by many companies, because it's a lot of money to invest to become ISO 20000 certified. But the trend now is that this will follow in the next few years. Organizations from all over the world are increasingly looking at certification as a way of differentiating themselves and ensuring high level of quality. So it means that it's not only when it's required, it's mandatory, but most of the organization, even if it's not mandatory, will see your certification as an ISO 20000 certified company as a huge difference from your competitors. Streamline conformance activity. As we said, organizations have to conform and comply with more and more regulations and laws. So organizations that adhere to the policies and processes of ISO 20000, especially the management procedure, have a strong foundation for conformance activity. Indeed, conformance with ISO 20000 is proven to drive down the cost of conformance to a multitude of regulations, from PCI DSS to Sarbanes-Oxley, because once you have put in place the right management procedures and processes, of course it will become easier to fulfill the new requirements, conformance and compliance requirements, as you will have already the right processes in place, and it's just an adaptation of what already exists. If you don't have anything in place, you will need to restart from the beginning, and of course the cost will be higher. For example, one utility company's CIP conformance effort was reduced by 50% because the company was already ISO 20000 compliant. So this is a huge saving which can be achieved through ISO 20000 certification. Fifth key top benefit is improved merger and acquisition. Today we are on worldwide competition, and many companies, external growth is the base of growth of many companies in the world. So leveraging ITIL practices to achieve ISO 20000 certification means that companies have a far better insight into the resources in place and what will be required to support both organic growth and any merged organization. It's much more simple to integrate a new company that you have just acquired if you are already certified against ISO 20000. I've seen a lot of companies, mainly in the bank domain, which are now ISO 20000 certified, because in the banking environment we see a lot of merger, acquisition and so on. So it's really a good advantage. The result is that the right resources can be put in place in time to maximize the success of the merger and acquisition activity. We said that ISO 20000 is based on continual improvement. So it will, of course, if you certify against ISO 20000, it will make it mandatory to have a continual improvement culture. In most of the companies, it's very difficult to focus in continual improvement because we are generally in firefighting mode and we are not improving. But at the end, if you are certified against ISO 20000, it's not a choice anymore. You need to be in a continual improvement mood. So companies in the economic downturn want efficiencies now that can be leveraged to support expansion and profitable growth in the future. By enforcing conformance to the requirements, ISO 20000 drives highly effective and efficient management of IT services and promotes a culture of proactive service delivery that supports continual improvement. Of course, seventh key benefits. If you are certified, if your company is certified against ISO 20000 standard, it demonstrates the best practices. Internal service provider organizations that have achieved ISO 20000 certification are increasingly being heralded as market leaders, with competitors now encouraged to follow suit. Competitors and also their suppliers, because these companies need to ensure that the IT service chain from their suppliers is aligned with their processes and requirements. So it will encourage the competitors to become also certified against ISO 20000, but also it will encourage the suppliers, if they want to work with an ISO 20000 certified company, to become themselves ISO 20000 certified. Risk and cost optimization. Of course, this is a very, very important topic on the agenda of the boards and the executive committee. They always request reducing cost from minimizing incident impact on the business activity, and of course lower or eliminate any rectification cost with problem management. But they also want to minimize the risk. Risk is maybe the most important topic on the agenda of the boards and the investors. So the potential for surprises must be reduced, minimized through a regular and systematic review of the IT service management performance. And this is done in ISO 20000 because there is this annual review, management review, and these yearly assessments. Integration with other management systems. So we already talked about that. For companies that have already achieved ISO 9001 and ISO 27001 certification, the management system of ISO 20000 will be familiar. It's the same structure. It follows the same plan, do, check, act methodology linked to customer business requirements, using business metrics and reinforcing continual improvement. And I here remind you about ISO 27013, which will be a great help for the companies already using an ISMS based on ISO 27001. And finally, very important now is the communication issues. When you have an incident in your IT, so you know that people are communicating more and more through the social network, and it's very important that you keep the communication under your control. Effective and efficient communication about IT service management issues inside and outside the organization increase the confidence of the business and customers. It's about being considered as a very reliable company because your IT services are working well. As soon as there is a risk that there is a failure of your IT service management inside your companies or in one of your suppliers' services, and if this is communicated on the social networks, it will result at loss of image. So your image will be damaged, and of course, the consequence is a loss of customers, loss of confidence from the investors, and so on. So through the right implementation of ISO 20000, you will ensure that you will reduce the communication issues about your IT service management. So this is all about the 10 top benefits, and I will give the keyboard to Albion, who will talk you about PCB ISO 20000 training course before we take some questions. Albion?
Thank you, Alain, for delivering this informative presentation. We want to inform all the attendees that PCB provides training and certification services for ISO 20000 Introduction, Foundation, Lead Implementer, and Lead Auditor. The training is designed to provide you the required knowledge on how to efficiently implement and manage quality of information technology services. A PCB certificate will exemplify your dedication in implementing and managing these processes and frameworks, and most importantly, you will be recognized worldwide. Now, we will go ahead to answer some of the questions from the attendees regarding today's topic. The first question is, could you repeat the real practical difference between ITIL 2011 V3 and ISO 20000?
Very simple. ITIL is a best practices framework, so it means best practices are described in 5 books, and but it is not required to put in place these best practices. It's just an advice on what should be done for each of these practices. But there is no requirement at all for each practice to be put in place. Best practices are there to be adopted and adapted by the organization. So it means it's not mandatory to take all the practices. It's not mandatory to take them. Of course, you don't take them as they are written because it's a generic formulation. At the opposite, ISO 20000 is composed of mandatory requirements which make a complete set of requirements, and the company is assessed against all these requirements. If one of these requirements is not satisfied, you will not be granted the certification for the organization. So the difference is that you can certify people against ITIL best practices. It's the ITIL Foundation, intermediate practitioner. So it's a certification about the knowledge of the people, but not about how the company, the organization is applying. This does not exist on best practices. It is what is a standard made for. Certify organization. Of course, you can also certify people on the knowledge of the standard, but the main objective is to certify organizations against the standard.
Thank you, Alain. Another attendee asked, what is the main difference between ISO 20000 and ISO 27005?
ISO 27000 is ISO 27005 is not a standard. It's a method to evaluate risk. You cannot certify an organization against ISO 27005. You can certify an organization against ISO 27001. ISO 20000 is a standard. So ISO 20000 Part 1 is a set of requirements to certify an organization. It's not a method. It's just a set of mandatory requirements that the organization has to follow. The same as for ISO 27001, not 5. 5 is risk management, so it's not a standard. You cannot certify a company against this ISO 27005 publication.
Thank you, Alain. And the third question is, my organization already has ISO 9000 certification. Do we need ISO 20000 as well?
I'd say yes, because it's not the same. ISO 9000 is about quality management. If I would like to simplify, ISO 9000 is about documenting what has to be done and doing with evidences that it's correctly done. It's more about the maturity of the organization to follow the rules regarding quality. ISO 20000 is specifically for IT service management. And what we want to measure is the effectiveness and efficiency of these IT service management. At the end, I would say that ISO 20000 will ensure that the services that you are delivering are of good quality. ISO 9001, which is not for IT service management, which is more generic, we ensure that you are doing those things properly, but not that what you deliver is of good quality.
Thank you, Alain.
So it's complementary. It's not, you can have both.
Thank you, Alain. And now, because of the time limitation, the other questions will be answered by Mr. Bounou accordingly by email. Thank you, Alain, again for this great presentation, and thank you everyone for attending today's webinar. I would like to inform you that this webinar will be recorded and posted on our website and YouTube channel. Once you leave today's webinar, you will receive a survey about the presentation, and we would appreciate if you complete it and provide us with your feedback. Also, if you are aware of an interesting topic that you would like to discuss and participants would benefit from, please feel free to write down your suggestion. For more information, visit our website pcb.com. Thank you all again and have a great time.